Close your eyes for a moment. Now picture this, a flickering screen in a dark theater in 1930. Kids sit there, eyes glowing with wonder, lips coated in the sweetness of penny candy. There, flickering on the screen, something dances. Something that shouldn't be dancing. Something that was never meant to entertain children. But now, every child in that room is staring straight at it. What you're about to discover isn't a conspiracy theory. It's not some internet creepypasta invented for clicks. These are real cartoons, shown in real theaters, to real audiences who had no idea what they were actually watching. Cartoons created by men haunted by war, crushed by poverty, and desperate to capture something darker and far too twisted for innocent eyes. Tonight, we're going into the vault. We're pulling out the reels that studios tried to bury. We're talking to the descendants of animators, and we're asking a question that should terrify anyone who grew up with Saturday morning cartoons. What were they really trying to tell us? The Fleischer brothers, Max and Dave, are working out of a converted warehouse in New York City. The Great Depression has just shattered America's economy like glass. Outside, the hungry queue in endless lines. Stretching so far they vanish into the distance. Men who used to wear suits now wear desperation. And in this moment, in this darkness, the Fleischer brothers created one of the most disturbing cartoons ever shown to the public. Swing You Sinners. This cartoon runs just 6 minutes. 6 minutes that feel like descending into hell itself. Here's what happens. Bimbo, the dog, steals a chicken. He runs. And then, something goes wrong. Reality fractures, gravestones crack open. The ground becomes a mouth. Demonic chickens with human faces chase him through a graveyard where skeletons dance and sing about damnation. And massive, grotesque demon heads emerge from the darkness, singing, "You sinned, you sinned," in voices that sound like they're coming from somewhere deep underground. The historical record is clear. This cartoon was shown before feature films in regular theaters, to regular audiences, including children. But here's what most people don't know. The story behind why the Fleischer brothers made something so psychologically disturbing. Max Fleischer was the older brother, the inventor, the technical genius. He'd fought in World War I, not in the trenches, but what he saw in the medical corps never left him. Bodies, broken machinery, the thin line between man and meat. How about his brother? Dave was the artist and the dreamer. But in 1930, Dave Fleischer was drowning in debt. The studio was losing money. They needed new material, but fast, cheap, and attention-grabbing. And here's where it gets interesting. In the animator's notes, only discovered in 2003, there's a sketch, a crude drawing, and written next to it in Dave Fleischer's handwriting. The chicken must have Max's father's face. The Fleischer brothers' father had died 2 years earlier. Max Fleischer had refused to go to the funeral. So, Swing Ye Sinners was really about a dog stealing a chicken. Or was it about guilt? About two brothers working 18-hour days in a warehouse while America fell apart, creating literal demons to process trauma they couldn't speak about. We'll never know for certain. But watch the cartoon again. Watch how Bimbo can't escape, how the demons multiply, how even the ground itself accuses him. And tell me this was just for children. But Swing You Sinners was just the beginning. 1 year later, the Fleischer brothers released something even more disturbing, Bimbo's Initiation. On the surface, Bimbo falls through a manhole and finds himself in an underground cult that tortures him into joining them. Stabbed with a sword, chased through trapdoors. And through it all, hooded figures chant, "Wanna be a member? Wanna be a member?" The imagery is blatant. This is clearly inspired by secret societies. The Freemasons had been a source of paranoia in 1930s America, with conspiracy theories about their rituals spreading through radio programs and tabloid newspapers. But there's a verified historical fact that changes everything about this cartoon. In 1931, the Fleischer Studios was unionizing. Animators were organizing, demanding better pay, shorter hours, basic dignity. But what about Max Fleischer? His stance on unions was simple Absolutely not. He saw unionization as a betrayal, a cult-like manipulation of his workers. Bimbo's Initiation was released 3 weeks after the union vote. An animator, probably multiple animators, who had just voted to unionize, had to sit at their desks and draw a cartoon about a character being tortured into joining a group, frame by frame and hour by hour, knowing exactly what their boss was saying. But here's what makes it even darker. At the end of the cartoon, Bimbo finally agrees to join, and when he does, Betty Boop appears, removes her hood, and everyone celebrates. The message is join the cult, and you get the girl. Resist, and you get tortured. This wasn't just a weird cartoon. This was psychological warfare, animated at 24 frames per second. It's 1932. Cab Calloway is the most famous black entertainer in America. His song Minnie the Moocher has become a phenomenon, a dark and swinging tune about a woman who dreams of luxury, that ends up with a low-down hoochie coocher and eventually kicks the gong around, a slang for opium addiction. The Fleischer brothers saw an opportunity. They'd pioneered a technique called rotoscoping, tracing over live action footage to create very realistic animation. And they convinced Cab Calloway to come to their studio, put on his white tuxedo, and perform Minnie the Moocher live. What they created became one of the most technically impressive and deeply unsettling cartoons of the era. Betty Boop runs away from home. She hides in a cave. Cab Calloway appears, except he's been rotoscoped onto a ghost walrus, moving with impossible and fluid movements that the human brain recognizes as real but cartoonish at the same time. This creates what animators call the uncanny valley, something that's almost human, but wrong. And in 1932, audiences had never seen anything like it. This cartoon was revolutionary. It proved animation could capture real human movement. It gave Cab Calloway mainstream exposure during an era of brutal segregation. But there's something else in Minnie the Moocher that nobody talks about. Watch the cave sequence carefully. Betty is surrounded by skeletons, ghosts, and supernatural beings. They dance, they multiply, they loom over her. And she's smiling. But it's not a happy smile. It's the smile of someone dissociating. Someone whose mind has left their body. Now remember what Minnie the Moocher is actually about. It's about drug addiction. About a woman who dreamed about the King of Sweden, who gave her things that she was needing, and then ended up in an opium den. So ask yourself, is Betty Boop exploring a magical cave? Or is this an animated representation of a young woman's drug-induced hallucination? The Fleischer brothers never spoke a word about it, but there's a reason this cartoon was partially censored in later decades. And it wasn't just because of racial caricatures in the background. We were watching a children's character experiencing a hallucinogenic nightmare, rotoscoped by the most famous black performer in America during the height of the Depression, and nobody said a word. Before Mickey Mouse, there was another rodent, one that Walt Disney considered his first real success, one that was stolen from him in the most devastating betrayal of his early career. His name was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. In 1927, Walt Disney was just 26 years old. He's just created Oswald, a mischievous rabbit with a flexible body and chaotic energy. The cartoons are hits. Universal Pictures is distributing them. Disney thinks he's finally made it. Then he discovers that he doesn't actually own Oswald. Universal has the rights, and they secretly hired almost all of his animators behind his back. Walt Disney lost Oswald on a train ride back from New York. His wife Lillian was with him. She later said he didn't speak for 2 days, just stared out the window as America blurred past. What happened next shaped the entire history of animation. Disney created Mickey Mouse in secret, making sure this time he owned every single right. He became paranoid about control, about betrayal, about losing what he created. But before all that, before Mickey and before the Disney Empire, there were the late period Oswald cartoons, the ones made between 1928 and 1929, after Disney knew he was losing Oswald, but before he launched Mickey. And these cartoons are wrong. The early Oswald shorts are fun, slapstick, energetic, innocent. But the later ones, They are violent. Characters transform into disturbing shapes. Oswald himself becomes more aggressive and more unstable. There's a meanness to the humor that wasn't there before. In rival Romeos, Oswald actually attempts to pull a goat's stomach out through a throat. In Hungry Hobos, characters are so desperate for food they hallucinate and attack each other. In Poor Papa, the first Oswald cartoon, but released later, Oswald is portrayed as an exhausted father surrounded by dozens of screaming children he can't control. These were not meant for children. These were the work of a man who was losing everything and couldn't say it out loud. There's a theory that Disney deliberately made some of the later Oswald cartoons weird. He also made them disturbing because he knew they'd bear Universal's name, not his. If he couldn't keep Oswald, maybe he could poison the character, making him unlovable. Disney never spoke about Oswald publicly until the 1980s. When he finally did, he said, "It was like losing a child." But here's the thing about losing a child. Sometimes, in your grief, you wish the child had never been born at all. Oswald was that child, and Disney tried to kill him before he left. After losing Oswald, Disney became obsessed with control, with perfection, with creating worlds where nothing could be taken from him. And in 1929, he created something that would define animation forever: the skeleton dance. The first silly symphony. 4 skeletons rise from their graves and dance through a cemetery, using their own bones as instruments. They're playful, comedic even, but there's something about them that's never quite sat right. The verified histories say that the skeleton dance was a technical marvel. It pioneered synchronized movement, musical timing, and the idea that animation could be art, not only for gags. But there's a darkness underneath that most people miss. WWII Works animated the skeleton dance almost entirely by himself. It was Disney's partner, his most talented animator, the man who actually drew Mickey Mouse while Disney took the credit. And in 1930, 1 year after the skeleton dance, he would leave Disney. Just like the animators left for Oswald, just like everyone seemed to leave Disney. Watch the skeleton dance again. Watch how the skeletons dance in perfect synchronization, for individuals moving as one. Watch how they're identical, how they have no personality, how they dance because the music tells them to. Some animation historians believe the skeleton dance isn't about death. It's about animation itself, about artists who work in the dark, who are interchangeable, who dance to someone else's tune until their bones wear out. WWII Works animated it alone, hundreds of drawings, frame by frame, in a hot warehouse. While Disney courted distributors and took meetings, 1 animator, 4 identical skeletons, all dancing in the graveyard of a man's broken dreams. Disney would build an empire. WWII Works would be forgotten by everyone except animation historians, and the skeletons kept dancing. The Fleischer brothers have been pushing boundaries for years, but nothing prepared audiences for their version of Snow White. This is not Disney's Snow White. That would not come until 1937. This is the Fleischer Studios' Betty Boop version, and it is genuinely one of the most surreal pieces of animation ever created. The Queen orders her guards Bimbo and Coco to behead Betty. The Queen chases the protagonists until Bimbo grabs her tongue and, with one mighty yank, turns her inside out. The evil Queen is a nightmarish caricature. The Mystery Cave is a vision of hell, framed by Dante-inspired imagery of drinking, gambling, and reveling skeletons, showing innocence in its final ruin. The snowball-turned coffin and the lyrics of St. James Infirmary Blues support the drug abuse metaphor. If the snow represents cocaine, then its transformation into a coffin shows the fatal consequences of drug abuse. The Fleischer brothers were experimenting with surrealism, influenced by European art movements. They wanted to prove animation could be genuinely artistic, not just commercial. But in 1933, something else was happening. 1933 was the year Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. In America, FDR had just been inaugurated during the worst economic crisis in the nation's history. Unemployment was at 25%. Dust storms were beginning to devastate farmland. The world felt like it was ending. And the Fleischer brothers, these 2 Jewish immigrants from Vienna, created a cartoon where reality constantly transforms into nightmare, where the queen represents tyrannical power, and where the only way to survive is to keep dancing, keep bouncing, keep moving, even when nothing makes sense anymore. Max Fleischer still had family in Europe. His letters to them, archived in the Library of Congress, show increasing desperation throughout 1933, asking them to leave, begging them to come to America. Most didn't make it out. So watch Betty Boop's Snow White again. Watch how everything transforms into something threatening. Watch how Betty becomes aware of the dangers of the world and the dark side of mankind. This wasn't just surrealism. This was two brothers trying to process a world that was transforming into nightmare, using the only language they knew: animation. They never spoke about it. They just kept making cartoons. And in those cartoons, if you know where to look, you can see the shadows of what was coming. The 1940s changed animation forever, because suddenly, cartoons weren't just entertainment. They were weapons. Der Führer's face is the most famous example. In his dream, Donald Duck is transported into Nazi Germany, forced to work in a munitions factory, saluting Hitler's picture all day, eating stale bread and ersatz coffee. It's meant to be propaganda, showing Americans how terrible life under fascism would be, and it won an Academy Award. But here's what makes Der Führer's face genuinely disturbing. It works too well. Watch Donald's face while he works. The animation captures real psychological breakdown, the twitching, the exhaustion, the moment when his mind starts to fracture. This isn't cartoon exaggeration. This is what shell shock looks like. By 1943, several of Disney's animators had already enlisted. The studio was partially converted to making training films and propaganda. The animators who remained were working mandatory overtime, 6 or 7 days a week, pumping out content for the war effort. So when they animated Donald Duck having a mental breakdown from overwork in a factory, they were animating themselves. But the most disturbing wartime cartoon isn't even about the war. We need to talk about Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs, and we need to talk about it carefully. This is a Merry Melodies cartoon, directed by Bob Clampett, a reworking of Snow White with an all-black cast, and it is deeply, horrifically racist. The character designs rely on every ugly stereotype. The dialect is offensive. The caricatures are painful to watch. This cartoon has been banned from television since 1968. It's in the censored 11, a group of cartoons now deemed too racially offensive to ever be shown again. But here's what's important to understand. Coal Black wasn't created in a vacuum. 1943 was also the year of the Zoot Suit riots, white servicemen attacking Mexican-American and black communities in Los Angeles. It was the year of the Detroit race riot, when 34 people lost their lives in racial violence. America was fighting fascism abroad while practicing it at home. And Warner Brothers released a cartoon that portrayed black people as distorted portrayals, depicting them as primitive, exaggerated, and objectified, and showed it in mainstream theaters. Bob Clampett, the director, later claimed he was trying to celebrate black culture and jazz, that he hired black actors and worked with black musicians. He pointed to the cartoon's technical innovation, its energy, its music, but intent doesn't erase impact. Technical skill doesn't justify racism. And the fact that this cartoon exists, that it was approved, animated, distributed, and shown to audiences, tells us something crucial about animation's dark history. Cartoons don't just reflect their era. They reveal what people thought was acceptable, what studios thought they could get away with, what audiences would watch without protest. Coal Black is horrifying, but it's historically important, because pretending it doesn't exist means pretending that era of racism doesn't exist. And we can't fight shadows if we pretend they were never there. 10 years after the war, America is entering a new era. Television, suburbs, the nuclear family. Cartoons are becoming sanitized, softer, safer. And then WWII Studios released The Telltale Heart. This Edgar Allan Poe story of murder and guilt, animated with stark, expressionistic art and narrated by James Mason with genuine madness in his voice. It was nominated for an Academy Award. It's also one of the most psychologically disturbing cartoons ever made. The animation style is minimalist with abstract shapes, harsh shadows, a color palette of red, black, and sickly yellow. The narrator describes murdering an old man because he hates his vulture eye. He dismembers the body and hides it under the floorboards. Then he hears the heartbeat. Thump, 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 growing louder until he confesses. This cartoon was shown before feature films in regular theaters. The same theaters showing Peter Pan and Roman Holiday. WWII Studios had been founded by animators who left Disney during the 1941 strike, a brutal labor dispute that split the animation industry. These were artists who were tired of cute animals and happy endings. They want an animation that could explore the full range of human experience, including madness, murder, and guilt. The director, Ted Parmelli, was a World War II veteran. He'd served in the Pacific Theater, and when he came back, he told colleagues he couldn't sleep without seeing the faces of dead soldiers. The Telltale Heart is about a man who can't escape the consequences of what he's done, who hears phantom sounds in the darkness, who can't live with his own guilt. So maybe this wasn't just an adaptation of Poe. Maybe this was a veteran trying to exorcise ghosts through animation, turning personal horror into art, using the medium of cartoons, because no one expected cartoons to tell the truth. James Mason's narration is too good and too real. The animation is too unsettling. This isn't entertainment. This is a confession. In 1937, between the nightmares of the Fleischer brothers and the sanitized future of 1950s animation, Disney created something that exists in a strange middle space, the old mill. On the surface, the old mill seems innocent. It's a silly symphony about an abandoned mill and the animals that live there. There's no dialogue, just music and atmosphere. But something about the old mill has lingered in viewers' minds for decades. It's beautiful. The animation is revolutionary, with the first use of the multi-planed camera creating stunning depth, but it's also deeply, inexplicably melancholic. The mill is rotting. You can see decay in every frame. Broken boards, cracked stone, rust eating through metal. The animals inside are just trying to survive. And when the storm comes, it's not exciting, it's terrifying. The camera angles are low, making the mill look massive and unstable. Lightning reveals things in flashes. The wind sounds like screaming. Watch the sequence carefully, where the mill starts to collapse. The structure groans. Wood splinters. The entire building seems alive and in pain, and in that moment, you realize the mill is the main character, and we're watching it die. 1937 was the year Disney was gambling everything on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first feature-length animated film. If it failed, the studio would collapse. Disney had already mortgaged his house. He was sleeping at the studio. His staff was exhausted. And in the middle of this stress, Disney greenlit The Old Mill, a short film with no story, just a building falling apart during a storm. Some animation historians believe The Old Mill is about Disney himself, about a structure that's held together through force of will, threatened by forces beyond its control, barely surviving the night. The mill doesn't collapse, but it doesn't recover either. When the sun rises, it's still broken, still rotting, still waiting for the next storm. Disney never made another cartoon like The Old Mill. After Snow White succeeded, everything became bigger, brighter, safer. But for 8 minutes in 1937, Disney showed us what fear of losing everything actually looks like. To trace the origins of this story, we must go back to 1929. Back to the early days when no one knew what animation could or should be. Back to Hell's Bells. This is a Disney silly symphony, made for children, distributed to mainstream theaters, and it's set in literal hell. The cartoon opens with demons dancing in a cavern of fire, creatures playing music on bones. A demon cat tortures a demon mouse. Supposedly, the voice for both Satan and Cerberus was provided by none other than Walt Disney himself. For 6 minutes, we watched detailed depictions of eternal torment, animated with Disney's signature charm and technical precision. It's playful. That's what makes it so disturbing. The demons are having fun. This is their entertainment. Torture is a party. Hell's Bells was made right after Disney lost Oswald. This is first silly symphony under his own control, and he chose to set it in hell. Disney was raised by a father who believed in harsh, physical discipline. Elias Disney would beat his sons for minor infractions. Walt ran away from home multiple times as a teenager. He once said in an interview, later suppressed, that he used to have nightmares about his father dragging him to a cellar that didn't exist. Watch Hell's Bells with that knowledge. Watch the demons, figures of authority, tormenting smaller creatures. Watch the inescapable caves, the trapped victims, the way punishment is entertainment. Disney never spoke about Hell's Bells. When asked about his early, silly symphonies, he'd list the Skeleton Dance, Springtime, and Mother Goose, but never Hell's Bells. The cartoon was rarely re-released. It's not in most Disney collections. It's been almost forgotten, but it's out there, and it exposes something Disney spent his whole career trying to bury. He understood exactly what hell looked like. He had seen it himself. So why does any of this matter? These are old cartoons, black and white. Most people will never watch them. Why spend time digging into the darkness of animation history? Because cartoons hide more than they reveal. So it's not about what they show, but about what they are. We're told cartoons are for children. We're told they're innocent and simple. We're told that animation is about fun and fantasy and happy endings. But that was never true. Animation has always been a medium of expression for people who couldn't express things any other way. For immigrants who couldn't speak about trauma, for veterans who couldn't describe what they'd seen, for artists working in poverty, in fear, in systems that didn't value them. The Fleischer brothers put their grief into demon chickens and underground cults. Disney put his fear of abandonment into a dying mill and a rabbit he tried to destroy. They couldn't say these things out loud, so they said them in animation. And here's what's important. We're still doing this. Look at Adventure Time. A show about a boy and his dog in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, where everyone's trying to process grief and trauma through whimsy and violence. Look at Steven Universe, a show about intergenerational trauma, identity, and learning to live with the consequences of your parents' wars. Look at BoJack Horseman, a show about depression, addiction, and how success doesn't heal the parts of you that are broken. These shows are doing exactly what the Fleischer brothers did in 1930. They are processing darkness through animation. They're saying things that would be too heavy, too real, too raw in any other medium. Because animation gives us distance. It lets us look at nightmares through a screen of ink and color. It lets us laugh at demons because they're dancing. It lets us survive horror because it's just a cartoon. But it was never just a cartoon. They were real people, trying to tell the truth in the only way they knew how. And if we don't understand that, if we dismiss these old black and white reels as weird artifacts from a primitive era of animation, we miss something crucial. We miss the proof that art comes from pain. That creativity is often born from trauma. Animation doesn't hide darkness. It brings the truth into the light. It makes it visible. It gives it form. All the artists who sketched torture devices, dancing corpses, and nightmares that still survive in dusty archives, they were just human, frightened and scarred, trying to make sense of a world that refused to make sense, and they left us clues. Breadcrumbs, messages hidden in cartoons that were supposed to be for children. They were trying to tell us that darkness is real, that trauma lives in what we create, that sometimes the only way to survive horror is to draw it, frame by frame, until it becomes something you can control, something that ends when the real runs out. The cartoons are still there, still flickering in the dark, still waiting for someone to understand what they really mean. And maybe now, that someone is you.